Okay, fantastic. Let's get started. Welcome to this morning's session. And a bit of an interesting story. I have had to change locations, but I'm happy that I did. So we're going to get started right away. And today we are discussing tips for hiring domestic support in Ghana. Yes, Deborah, good morning. I'm well. Thank you for asking. Good morning, Juliet. Thank you. I see you had your hand raised. I enabled you to speak, but I think you changed your mind. So let's get this started. I'm just going to pick up my slides now, and we will zoom straight in. Here we go. Okay. All right, let's do this now. Let me share my screen. And we're good to go now. Okay, all right. So as you know, this is YWL Summit 2020, and I'm delighted to have you with me this morning. Thank you, Micah. You're welcome. Thank you. I'm delighted you're here with me as well. As you already know, YWL is about real life situations of real people with real lessons. And today is session 7 out of 12. So this is our 7th session. And I see some of you on this call have been on almost every session. And I would like to commend you, say thank you. I feel honored and humbled that you join me and the various speakers to learn so that we can learn together. Today, I'm going to be discussing a very interesting but relevant topic. I'm going to be sharing with you tips for hiring domestic support in Ghana. I say in Ghana because that's the context. I'm sure it probably would be relevant to a number of other friends and relations in other African countries, but the experience I'm going to share today is situated right here in Ghana, although I know that sometimes you can take, what is it called, transfer of credibility. So you can take something that works and try it in other settings. So let's get started. Let's position this first. Let me tell you why I'm doing this. So first, I'm a student and teacher of personal mastery. What that means is that I'm very, very interested in how the human being can use the knowledge of themselves, which is self-awareness, to grow themselves and do themselves or do you productively. So know you, grow you, and do you productively. Now, doing you productively just means that you know yourself so well and you appreciate the diversity that exists within you. So you are able to extend that gracefulness or graciousness to other people and build productive relationships. A productive relationship is one in which there's harmony, so we're able to achieve the objectives that we set out for ourselves. So personal mastery is very relevant in personal relationships, relationship between parents and child, spouses, businesses, team leads. It's extremely crucial that you start with self-awareness first. Apart from that, I've also been on this house help or domestic support journey for quite a while. For about 3 to 4 years of my life, I professionally recruited domestic support for families. And so I bring that experience into today's conversation with the hope that you can pick some of the tips and begin to apply it in your own setting as well. Other than that as well, I work in human resources. I've been involved in personal development for way over a decade. I have been on this journey for quite a while. And then I've also recruited actually for my home. So on my last count, I have recruited 10 times or 10 different people and maintained lasting relationships with about 7 of them in the 22 years that I have been married. More relevant that we talk about it today, or the more reason we have to talk about recruiting domestic support today, is the fact that given coronavirus and the fact that we have to work from home, the support system that you build around yourself matters. Now, if you don't have a great support system where you try to do everything by yourself, it drains you, because then you're doing 4 or 5 jobs at the same time, 4 or 5 full jobs. You are working professionally, you are a parent, you are some like me have side gigs, so that makes it 3. Then you have a relationship with your spouse that you need to cultivate. So your hands are full all the time, and before you realize, you actually become resentful towards those that you should be loving, because it's draining. You're tired, So it's important that we discuss it today, so that we learn the tips that help us recruit really well in Ghana. That said, let's delve in quickly. Now, just a bit of history, and this is very anecdotal because it's not written. This is what I learned from the mothers who've gone before me on this journey. So history suggests that the concept of domestic support isn't new at all. Our struggles may be new, but the concept isn't new at all. It is suggested that years ago in history, what used to happen was that families would take a lot of their times, their young kids, and present them to families they perceived as more enlightened or had better opportunities, or a family in which the woman or the man had a special skill that they wanted any of their children to learn. So these children left their homes, their families, and moved into what was some kind of apprenticeship relationship. Now, everything that the child went through in this new home of theirs was meant to build them so that they could become like the teachers they were learning from. It was quite interesting. It was quite an interesting relationship from what I gather. Reason being that even when the child or that person in that relationship, the one who was the apprentice, felt unloved or felt that he or she was receiving inhumane treatment, if the person ran back to their own families, they were brought back, because whatever they were going through was considered part of that lesson of becoming that they needed to go through. Fast forward, colonial masters came, then it was twisted around quite slightly, because then now the people who stayed with them were their cooks, their housekeepers, a lot of what you and I would probably call some kind of what is it called, second-class citizen relationship in that existence, or in that relationship existed. Bring it to our generation. Now women don't only have skills that they use for their profession at home alone. They move out as professional women to work. So that whole family dynamic where the male in the house went out, did the work, came back, and the mother had taken care of the kids, taking care of the home, has dramatically changed. And more than ever, you need support to go through that. And so it's my hope that today's conversation will help you get master this process well, so that you reduce the likelihood of not hiring right and not having your domestic support workers stay for the period of the contract. So what should you expect today? Quite a lot. I must say that this is a program that I put together as a course for an online training. So after today, it's available either on Teachable or Coursera. I'm yet to determine that. But for a very long time, I have desired to have this out as a course, because a lot of people keep coming back to me. Bear in mind, I did this professionally, recruiting for families for quite a while in my life, almost 4 years. So every now and then, people still come back to me to say, Doreen, I need your help to recruit. What should I expect? How can I handle this better? And in going through that with them, I've documented what can help anybody who wants to do this by themselves, take this program and run away with. I think it's going to be available for $29 after today, but I'll let you know on what platform. So here's what to expect. We'll go through, I'm sorry, I just stopped my, okay. So here's what we'll go through. What I actually wanted to do was to hide the floating meeting controls, which I have done now. Okay, so we will examine beliefs. We'll clarify your needs. We'll go through where to find your domestic support. DS is domestic support. I'll walk you through interviewing for what you need. We'll go through pre-employment protocols, starting the relationship right, maintaining this DS relationship, what to do when you have to say goodbye. And then I'll also give you a few tips on if I had to do this again, what I would do differently. As in if I were recruiting today. Now, I don't have any domestic support in my home anymore. I have adult kids, so my phase in life is a bit very different from that now. So there are 8 modules for this program, very brief but really relevant modules. Let's get started with examining beliefs, which is our module 1. All right, so here's what I'd like for you to do. I need for you to think and write for a moment. When you think of recruiting domestic support, what are some of the thoughts and feelings or words that run through your mind? When you think that you need to bring somebody into your home to support you in the work that you do, what are some of the feelings that run through your mind? I'm going to go straight into the chat box. Feel free to do this either through the chat box or take a piece of paper and begin to write out all the words and feelings that run through your mind when you think of recruiting domestic support in your homes. So do that briefly, just for a minute. I want to see the words. Write them out. We're going to need them, so just take a piece of paper and write them out quickly. Excuse me. I'm sorry, this one says home wrecking. This one says introducing a stranger. Write out all your words. Let's do this together. Introducing a stranger, home wrecking. What are the words that run through your mind when you think of recruiting a domestic support into your house? How will? Juliet, please type out what you really want to say. I think it was curtailed. This one says empowerment. Okay, Mamley, empowerment. This one says abuse of your children. Okay. So let's write out the words either on a sheet of paper, and feel free to put some of the words in the chat box like you're doing right now. What are the words, what thoughts, what feelings run through your mind when you think of recruiting domestic support in your home? Okay, now that you've done that, I'm going to invite, okay, so I see one more comment in the chat box. I'm going to take that. This one says, are they agents of armed robbers? Yes, that's the feeling that goes, or the thoughts that go through her mind. This one says, would they welcome me as I welcome them? This one says, house chores, errands. Okay, so those are some of the thoughts and feelings and words that go through your mind when you think of recruiting domestic support. This one says health issues. Absolutely. So we're going to be looking at a bit of some of these as we go on, and hopefully, this one says leaving the administration of my home to a total stranger, especially my daughter. Absolutely. Absolutely. I can understand you, Micah, for that. So let's go through this, and hopefully our conversation today makes some of these lighter for you. So now I invite you to do this with me. Look at the words that you wrote, and then just either indicate a star or a tick. Let's use the tick sign. Indicate the tick sign by the word, any of the word that is positive, and then indicate the wrong sign or the X sign by any of the words that you use that is not so positive. So the tick sign for positive words, thoughts, feelings, and then the X sign or the wrong sign for not so positive or negative feelings, thoughts, words. So let's do that quickly on the sheet that you wrote. Okay, let's do that. Now, I'm going to ask you to now share with me, of the words that you wrote down, how many of them, so just tell me how many are positive, and let's use numbers. So hit the chat box again. How many of your thoughts, words, feelings were really positive? And how many of these words, thoughts, feelings were airy feeling, were not so positive? Please indicate that in the chat box for me. You can just use numbers for positive feelings. Just count them. Which of your feelings were positive? Which of your feelings were not so positive? Indicate either a tick sign or the X sign by them. This one says 2 positive. And how many not so positive? This one says 1 not so positive, 0 positive. This one says 0 negative, 2 positive. All right. Okay. So do that for all of you who listed out your words, your feelings. Please do that quickly. Okay. So I'm also going to ask you now to do this for me. And this, remember I told you this is a workshop that we're doing together. I'm going to ask just a very simple question, and I just need us to think for a moment. What influences your thoughts or your choice of words, the choice of words that you wrote? What influenced it? Is it hearsay? Is it something that you've heard from other people's, you don't have the source, but you kind of know that this is it? Or have you had the previous experience? Or have other people shared their experiences with you that make you, that gives you those thoughts, feelings, or words when you think of recruiting domestic support in your homes? What's the source? What's sponsoring your thoughts? And I'm seeing the comments coming through the chat box again, so I'm just looking at that. I see 1 not so positive, 0 positive, 2 positive, 2 negative, 1 negative, 1 negative. This one says experiences from myself. Yes, absolutely. Okay, this one says from others. Previous experiences I have witnessed. Okay, all right. This one says from being told experiences. Yes, so you've heard other people's experiences. This one says videos I have seen on social media. Absolutely. All of those influence our thoughts on the people that we bring, or we, excuse me, we're seeking to recruit into our home or domestic support. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Now, I'm just going to ask a very, another simple question now. And I need us to just reflect for a moment. So how might these thoughts or feelings influence your relationship with your domestic support or house help? How might these thoughts, these feelings that you have, in what way would they influence, knowing that you've heard, excuse me, there are some positive, not so positive, from your experience, from other people's experience, from videos you've heard, or you've watched, sorry, and things you've heard. How might these thoughts, feelings, or words that you put down influence your relationship with your domestic support? In what way will it influence your relationship with any new domestic support that you're bringing in? Feel free to hit the chat box and also put how this influences you, what you've watched already. How does it influence you when you think of recruiting domestic support in your house? How does it influence the relationship you have? What are some of the things that you're doing as a result of the things you've heard, seen, or witnessed? And I'm going back to the chat box. This one says, I might be paranoid about their motives and what they might do. This one says, I will really monitor their activities closely. If possible, I will fix a CCTV. This one says, constantly keeping a very good eye on the person. This one says, I am now more careful in the privileges I offer. Okay, so that's how some of the thoughts, the words, and the feelings, the things you've heard, these are some of the ways in which they affect any new recruits that you bring into your home. So we'll have a conversation about these as we go on. And I just want for a moment to now zoom, we've looked at our relationship with our domestic support. Let's look at our relationship with our employers as well. So in any employment relationship, what would be your reaction? So in your current employment, your previous employment, what would be your reaction if your employer used the same words to describe the relationship they have with you? How would you feel if your employer used the same words to describe the relationship they have with you? This one says, I give strict rules as to how I want things done and give little allowance for deviation. This one says, so we're still talking about how our thoughts, feelings have influenced our relationship with our domestic support. This one says, for me, the previous experiences affects the next person negatively, and I can understand that. So I want us now to zoom on ourselves. We've all, in one way or the other, been in an employment relationship as well. And I want us to think of our employment relationship and ask ourselves the same question on what would be our reaction if our employers, by virtue of their previous experiences, what they've heard, what they've experienced, what would be our reaction if they brought all of that into the new relationship with us? And I invite comments in the chat box as well. It's just for quick reflection, because I want us really to think today of some kind of reframing conversation. And that's why we're going through today's exercise. I don't see any comments coming through, so I'm going to move on and hopefully, okay, so I see this one. This one says, I won't give my best. Absolutely. I mean, if my employer fixed CCTV on me, I would feel like I'm not trusted. I can understand that. This one says, I would not give out my best. Okay, all right. So all I'm inviting us to do today is to have a conversation that helps us look at our domestic support conversation in a whole new light. And I'll give you reasons why. This one says, initially it will be tough, but over time I will work on proving my self-worth. So you see how different we are, and how we bring all of those differences into the relationship. Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Let's continue. Now, I invite you for a moment. So we've looked at our relationship with our domestic support. We've looked at how we would feel if we were in that situation. Now, I want us to zoom on ourselves and our domestic support. And to do this, I want you to think for a moment of all the great bosses you've had in your life. And tell me which of them that you would want to live with. As in, you close from work, but you go back and live with them. Would you want, so let me put the question this way. Would you want to live with any of your bosses? It's a yes or no answer. Would you want to live with any of your bosses? Think of all the bosses you've had so far in your life, and just hit the chat box and tell me whether it's a yes or a no. Would you want to live with any of your bosses? And I see the chat coming through. This one says yes. This one says no way. This one says yes. Okay. So again, just hit the chat box. Would you want to live with any of your bosses? You share the space together. So it's a domestic relationship. This one says no, you know. So the responses are as varied as we come. And I'm asking this particular question because I want us for a moment to think of how interesting the domestic support relationship is. And I see the feedback in the chat box. This is amazing. Oh, amazing, Grace. Thank you again for joining. But she says, I think it depends on the terms of employment. Times have changed, but I work with the old model of nurturing someone and then setting them up with a skill or trade after the agreed time frame. This approach is fraught with challenges, especially if you get a bad nut. If you get a good person, oh my word, it's a real blessing and pleasure. Thank you for sharing that, amazing Grace. Rita says, yes, there's a particular boss that she would not mind living with, but the others, no way. Deborah says yes with two and no with two. So those are the responses. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat box and for getting interactive. Now let's think of the domestic support relationship for a moment. It's a very interesting relationship for the people we recruit for a reason, or for a number of reasons. One, you have to live with your employers in a lot of the cases. Now, even if you don't live with them, if it's not one of the relationships where you live in their space, it's one of sharing personal space with people, because people go to work, come back, and they are in their personal spaces and want to be themselves, just let go. But then there's this new person in their space that they have to learn to cooperate and collaborate with. And it makes the relationship quite interesting. Secondly, it's also a very, you have two not so sure reporting lines. So if you're living with a married couple, there's a man and a woman who are figuring their relationship, but then there's a new relationship, an external person in the relationship. Now, one of my very interesting examples, so our very first house help when I first got married, and we learned to do things way better after that. But I'm quite process oriented. So is my husband, but my husband is also extremely people oriented. So I say to this young lady who had just moved in, I say, please let me know before you touch anything in the fridge, because I had bagged everything, labeled. I have OCDs, I'm crazy like that. So I label my stew in the fridge and things like that. And I know exactly what I've put there and I have planned out. But my husband in onboarding her also says, there's food in the fridge, feel free to take whatever you want, So you see the interesting relationship this young lady now has. So with my spouse, it is feel free to take whatever you want. With me, it's I need to know, all right? And it's very interesting for the domestic support, because now they're living with two people who sometimes have not yet figured themselves out and are learning on this journey, but now there's this new person. The other thing also is that there's a third party employer in the relationship as well. If there are children in the relationship, the domestic support, the relationship between the domestic support and the kids is very interesting, in that the kids are also employers, but the domestic support has supervisory rights over the kids. So it's quite an interesting employment situation for these people who we bring into our homes. And they're dealing with all of that and have to deal with the changes they are going through, leaving their comfort zone into a space that they are not sure of. So let's have that in mind as we have this conversation. Right, let's move on now. So on this conversation, I'm going to be inviting you to think differently on your domestic support. When I was doing this professionally, I had a lot of clients come to me and say, I need someone that I help. Or when the relationship doesn't go right, they say, this person I was doing a favor, this person who could not even afford 3 square meals where they're coming from, and I'm feeding them, and they do this. I want us from the onset to look at this relationship, given the changes that the whole domestic support concept has gone through, to one that we ask ourselves, what kind of employer do I want to be? Because it's actually an employment relationship. And so I just invite you to ask yourself that question, to say, what kind of employer would I want to be? And as we go through the tips, and I share some of the things that I have learned to do differently and how I recruited for other people. I recruited countlessly for families. And I'm just going to be sharing all of those tips. So have that at the back of your mind to say, what kind of employer do I want to be? And if we remember Kofi Fain's conversation with us, he says, if you're not sure what it is you want to be, think of what you don't want to be. And let's have that at the back of our mind as we have this conversation. The reason I'm inviting you to do that is very simple. If you perceive someone to behave in a particular way, you react to them in a particular way. One of my coaches puts it nicely. He says, to the hammer, everything else is a nail. So I just want us to now think, if you begin to think of employment or employer-employee, our conversation begins to take shape as we carry on. So that's about clarifying examine our beliefs. And what we did in that module was to look through the journey of evolution of this domestic support relationship, and to now begin to situate it in the context of employer-employee, albeit in a very interesting setting, which is our personal spaces. In the next conversation, we're going to be looking at clarifying our needs. What is it that you really need domestic support for? And that's what we're going to be talking about. I see in the chat box, it says to the hammer, everything else is a nail. Absolutely. All right. Okay, so what do you need domestic support for? When I was recruiting, people will come to me, and when I ask them that question, they say, oh, not really anything much, just house chores. And it's for them, it's very simple, you know, just house chores, take care of the kids. I have 2 dogs. But I invite them to go a lot more deeper. And that's what I'm going to be inviting you to do with me on this call today. To clarify and to get very granular what you need domestic support for. So for me, it's always important in any relationship that you start with your why. And based on the experiences of other people that I have recruited for and myself, people recruit for somebody who will come and support with cleaning, meal prep, childcare, errands, pet care. Some even do gardening, laundry. But the main reason is that this person is coming to support so that you get something. And I invite you to put that so that, complete that sentence for me. When you think of recruiting domestic support, what is your end goal? What is it that you want this person to support you and free you up for? What is it? Hit the chat box and share that with me as well. What is it that you want this person to support you with? So they support you with cleaning and all of those things so that something happens for you. What is that thing? So I invite you to complete that sentence you see on the screen for me. You're recruiting for support with cleaning, meal prep, childcare, errands, pet care, gardening, and laundry so that. And I also, we learned to frame this really well for our clients when I was doing this professionally. Let me reduce the screen now. It's taking over my chat box. Okay, there you go. All right. All right. So this person is to assist Mr. and Mrs. Asumesi and their children. And this I just took from some of the offer letters that I drafted for my clients. It's Mr. and Mrs. Asumesi or somebody else and their children. I'm hitting the chat box again. I like how we're getting really interactive today. Excuse me. This one says, I need DS or domestic support for company for my aged mom, clean house, meal prep, childcare, so that I can concentrate at work and come to a clean home, so that I will spend time with my family, supporting the home so that in return I can also be a blessing to him or her. Amazing Grace says, so that I can create value, more quality time with my husband and children, and so that I can also give them a leg up in life. Those are really, really powerful conclusions to this phrase. Okay, I like the bit on freeing yourself so that you can have time with your children and your spouse. Really, really important. Otherwise, before you realize, my sister puts it nicely, you wake up one day and there's this adult in your house and you're wondering, who is this? And you're like, oh, that's my son. Hey, when did he become a man? Because we kind of just missed that process, and we're asking for that support so that we can have that time with the people that we love. Now, I invite you to look at this sentence again. You see how loaded it is? Support with cleaning. In fact, one of the comments said, with support with my aged mom, cleaning, meal prep, childcare, home care, so that I can come home to a clean house and I can come and rest. Now, for any individual coming into this relationship, that's an absolutely lot of work. And we're going to go through that to see how come all of this happens, especially when you feel that you're giving this relationship your best, but then the person leaves. And so we'll talk a bit about it. This one says, so that I can have time to run my business effectively. Absolutely. Absolutely. You need that support. This one says, help me help you. So I want to support them achieve their goals. Okay. Remember, today we're going to be looking at it. We're going to be clarifying what that help is. And the one way to do that is to reframe it and ask ourselves what kind of employer you want to be. And I'll walk you through those steps. All right. So now that we've clarified our why, let's go a bit deeper. Your why will give you clarity on the type of domestic support required. When you clarify what it is that you want. Now, in Ghana, when I was recruiting, people will come to me and say, I want a housekeeper. That's not enough for me. And I'll walk you through how I break down that. I get really granular. Remember, my personality is actually, I'm very process oriented. I like to think, I think process, like I break down things. That's how I'm wired. And now I have a language for it because Kessie, the kind of work I do, I've gone through a lot of assessments that speak to my life like that. So the housekeeper, and people call it different names. There's a janitor, there's a steward, there's a cleaner, caretaker. One of the things I realized, there's house help, which is the commonest in Ghana. One of the things I realized was anytime a client came as an employer and they said, I'm looking for a maid servant, none of my agents wanted to go to them. Somehow, how we call them also affects the psyche of the domestic support. People also, when you recruit for the foreigners in Ghana, there's concierge, there's au pair, or childminder was the commonest that I got. There's mother's help for when the child is, when the mother has a little child before she goes back to work. There's nanny, there's cook or chef, there's gardener, there's a pet keeper. Now, people recruit different people for these roles. But sometimes people recruit one person and say to me, oh, I just need them to help around the house. It was my initial mistake when I started this professionally. After doing it for two people, I began to break it down to say no, because I was taking feedback from the people, the agents I placed, and I would say, no, we need to break it down and get really granular. And that's what we're going to do right now on this call. So look at some of the specific responsibilities of a housekeeper. Now, when you say that somebody is your housekeeper or house help or a caretaker, a lot of the times we want the person to be involved in sweeping, vacuuming, mopping and I'll go granular. How many rooms are there in the house? So there's living room, there's bedroom, there's kitchen, toilets, there's the net. In Ghana, a lot of our homes have nets, window nets and door nets. There's washing the window nets. There's laundry, which is washing, ironing, sorting the laundry, and all of that. There's taking out trash, there's grocery shopping, there's monitoring your supplies and ordering when they're needed. There's reporting repairs. The door handle is broken. The fridge door isn't closing properly. We expect this person to do all of these things. But sometimes it also comes with child minding. And this person has to bathe and dress the kids, change diapers and potty train. Children's laundry, which is almost every day. It's very different from when it's an adult only relationship. But if there's a child, the children, how the kids saw themselves, it's almost every day. There's meal preparation, there's planning the meals, there's meals preparation, there's arranging for them to go to the neighbor's house and play, there's picking them back, there's playing with them indoor, there's taking them out for a walk, there's doing educational activities with them, fixing the puzzle, there's taking them to school, bringing them from school. Some are expected to read to the children, help with homework, organize bedroom, pick up toys, disinfect toys, administer medication if the parents consent. Then you need to be able to document when the mother comes back or the parents come back, what happened today? And you need to walk them through all of that. Then there's light housekeeping, So one of my friends put it very nicely. She walked to me one day, and please don't take this, for the women on the call, don't take this personal, but she walked to me one day and she said, it was a client when I was recruiting, she says, Doreen, I need a wife. And I said, how do you mean you need a wife? Because I felt she's like, see, I sat on the table at work today. and all the men were planning meeting for 7:30. And I looked round, I was the only woman on the table. And I thought about who will pick my kids, who will take my kids to school. And I realized that their wives are doing that for them. Doreen, recruit me a wife. I need somebody who can do all of these things. So now think of this kind of schedule. And I'm hitting the chat box because the chat box is just going bim, 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 bim now. But this one says, Amazing Grace says, but Chalet, still there are gaps. I call it domestic assistant. What kind of employer do I want to be? Good question. Never thought of that for domestic assistant. I will come back to this. It's a very interesting read. I'll really come back. Amazing. No, I think I want us to hear her. She says, I call it domestic assistant. What kind of employer do I want to be? Good question. Never thought of that for domestic assistant. I do take a cue from Proverbs 31, as the Proverbs woman. She rises also when it is still night and gives food to her household and assigns tasks to her maids. She opens and extends her hand to the poor, and she reaches out her filled hands to the needy. She does not fear the snow for her household, for all in her household are clothed in expensive scarlet or wool. That sounds like too much work for one person. So even for the woman in the house, that sounds like too much work. But if you bring somebody, and just remember that when it is your own, your mental willingness or your ability to go the extra mile is really different. Now let's think about it this way. When you're doing your own business, you're suddenly not tired when you have to do things that if you were in a given employment relationship, those words we had used to describe our domestic support relationship have been used on you, you probably will not be able to go the extra mile. But if it's your business, you push. It's 9:30, a client calls, you want to see what you can do the next morning. But suddenly, we bring this person into our home. This person doesn't have the same feeling, but this person is saddled with, you see the things, the tasks on the screen. They have to do all of this and more. Sometimes one person is also responsible for cooking. The person will monitor stock of items, they will replenish stock, they will ensure food items are packed, they maintain a sanitized and orderly kitchen. I mean, if you live with me, the kitchen is my office. I love food, and I love order and cleanliness. So even my plates have to be arranged in ascending order. Can you imagine that? So some of them also, we agree the meal plan. If you're like me, I mean, we think about it, we write it out. Then the person now has to ensure that these meals are prepared. They present the food in a presentable manner. If they are a gardener, please, for those ones as well, we get really specific. And for pet keepers as well, we outline. By the time we are done, when I'm recruiting for a client, by the time I'm done with a client and the client lists out all of these, sometimes he or she looks at it and says, oh, wow. And suddenly they appreciate themselves first, or the person in their lives who has been doing that for them. And then they understand what this person has to do. And the reason I do this with them is very important. When you go through this, it helps you determine the kind of person that you would want to hire. Very important. So for me, when my kids were much younger, it was critical that the person was literate. I needed somebody who could read and write. I didn't need any background working with previous people. It wasn't important to me, but it was important to me that in their homes, they had been exposed to that. So I liked the first or second daughters or somebody who had supported an auntie to cater for the kids. So it was critical to me what they knew how to do. And I'll tell you how I asked them questions to determine that. But once you determine all the things, once you enumerate all the things on why you're bringing the DS into your home, it will help you determine the kind of background that you're looking for. So for me, minimum was JHS. If the person hadn't done JHS, it was hard. I didn't even consider, and I'm sharing me with you. So when I work with my clients, after we've enumerated, so if the person has to administer medication to kids, it's important that they understand that baby oil and cod liver oil are not the same. And a very interesting scenario, one of my clients who was coming to recruit for me said that the reason that she had come to me was because of a previous experience. And she said, She had come home from work because earlier that day because she wasn't feeling well. And when she got home, her baby was, yearning for her. So she grabbed the baby and she changed the baby's diaper and realized that the baby had the skin rash, those reddish things. So she said to her, after changing the diaper, she said to her domestic support, bring a baby's oil so I can apply on the bum. So the domestic support now brings the cod liver oil. And she says, no, the baby oil for the bum. The domestic support said, this is it. She says, hey, So she found out that day that the domestic support, who wasn't literate, was giving the baby oil for the skin as medication, teaspoon by teaspoon, and was rather rubbing the cod liver oil on the bum. So for me, critical that if it's childcare, the person is literate. Experience, they've done this either with their parents or with another relation. They know how to handle basic things, and those ones I can teach them, but if they've done it before, it helps me. Also critical to consider is your personality and theirs, extremely. I mean, remember I said I am process oriented. I found that I do very well with my psychological similars, Yes, it's great to have, for the person to have, to be happy-go-lucky and all of that. But for me, knowing me, and it took me a while to figure this out, but knowing me, I fare better with people who also enjoy some order and process in their lives. So critical, know your why so that you know the background. From my recruitment experience, I also know that there are important considerations. Now, when you go through your why, it helps you determine the living arrangements. Are you considering live in or live out? For me, when my kids were younger, because I didn't want somebody, I didn't want to recruit straight from my neighborhood. So the people I got were often further away. And I had to leave our house then around 6 o'clock. If I left even at 6:05, I would be late to work. So I figured back then that if I said somebody should come and if I sought a live out arrangement, the person would have to leave their homes, say 4:30, to get to my place, and then they would have to go back when I can't return from work. I didn't see that working for anybody, and they being happy. They will probably take it, do it for a month, and they will go, because it's going to be quite a tough arrangement. Now, the remuneration also, all of these things that we mentioned, and the living arrangements will also have a role to play in the remuneration. Now, if it's a live-in arrangement, then there's nothing like TNT and all of that. But if it's a live-out arrangement, then obviously you need to consider remuneration, the TNT into the remuneration. Because if it's not that granular, then after a month or two, the person is not happy anymore, because this doesn't make sense for them. Because the truth is that the housekeeping work is a lot of work. No two ways about that. I mean, if you've had a child before, taking care of your own child, even you get tired. Sometimes you keep the baby on your chest and you doze off. But then suddenly this person who hasn't had a child, doesn't have a stake in all of this, is expected to do all of that with love and somehow maneuver doing everything at home, and sometimes take care of an aged parent in addition, and what they get at the end of the day, especially if it's a live-out arrangement, it doesn't suffice them. So then they're wondering, I'm better off probably selling my tomatoes in front of my house, and I would go. And I'll talk a bit about finding out their why as well shortly. It also, when you go through what you need the person for, other important considerations that it brings up would be time off. I found from my relationship with my domestic support and the people that I recruit that this was very important to them. When you enumerate what they've come in to do as well, and forgive me, but I'm veering into very gray areas, but these were very important considerations when I was recruiting professionally. The age. For me as an individual, I would always take somebody younger than 30, but not less than 18. Somehow, when I had my kids were young, I needed I kind of wanted a bit more maturity. And people have various reasons why they want younger or older people. And I know that if we don't speak about this well, we can probably be accused of ageism, but it's a very important consideration given that this relationship is domestic, you know. So the older the person, above 30, the person has a lot of social responsibilities on them as well that they need to attend to. There's a funeral, my uncle's wife, sister is dead. They need to show up. So for such a person, they would need time off almost weekly or twice a week. And sometimes it so happens that it's during the weekend that we need them most. So if you enumerate all the things that you need and draw a schedule, which I'll share with you shortly, it helps you determine the age of the person that you require as well. Then gender is also a very important consideration when you're thinking of domestic support. If you have a young daughter, then maybe a male is not the one for you in your home, you know. And then there are the unspoken bits, which always came out when I was recruiting for clients. Similarities in relationship keep relationships going. You know, they say opposite attract, but it's not the end of the statement. They say opposite attract, but McJ, the psychologist, says that you need similarities to keep the relationship going. So opposites attract, but you need similarities to keep the relationship going. So people would say, really low key to me, I'm a Muslim, so I'd rather prefer a Muslim, and I understood. And then people would say, oh, because I want the person to be able to cook my kind of meals, I want akmle, you know, so I would rather an ewe, if I'm an ewe. I had all of those coming up. And then interestingly, physical appearance also came up a lot, you know, I shared this based on experience, but I remember one of my clients looking at one of the ladies I had recruited for her. She says, this one there, my husband tastes power. You know, so those are real issues when you're recruiting domestic support. And those are things that you need to think about. Some of them are really unspoken, but they're really worth considering. The list is by no means exhaustive, but those are some of the things that kept coming up when I was recruiting or doing this professionally. The living arrangement is very important for me, even for my cleaner, and especially now, if it's a live-out arrangement. Sometimes I worry about, and remember I said I'm processed, my mind thinks like that. My mind is always thinking, what next, what next, what next? I think of what washrooms they're using, where they have been, if they're coming to handle food prep for me, is it okay from where they're coming from, you know, and things like that. But remember, we're really, really different, and our circumstances would determine the kind of living arrangements that we want to have. Maybe there's no other room for them to sleep in. If that's the case, what should the distance be from where they're coming from, and what time are they expected to report? I mean, if you live at, let's say you live downtown Accra Central, and your domestic support lives at Pokwase, and you want to leave the house at 5:30 in the morning, it's almost an impossibility for you to get somebody who will happily do that for 3 months and more if they have to travel that distance over and over and over again, especially if they have kids of their own. So those are very important considerations to make. I'm just hitting the chat box again to see some of the feedback coming through. This one says, I like your process style, Doreen. I'm enjoying the interactive nature of this session. Just my thoughts. Amelia, thank you. Deborah says, Mercy. I'm sure she's looking at the list and wondering, hey, so, you know, and you know that all of these things are things that we have been involved in. We are doing all of these things in our homes. Mamle says, process-oriented peeps is bae. I have 3 generations from 83-year-old to 2.5-year-old, so process helps me. Written meal plans, color-coded bowls for sorting food, written out work schedules, absolutely. All right, thank you for the comments coming through. Now let's continue our session. We're going to module 3. Now that we've figured out the details of what the person will need to do and the kind of person that we need to recruit based on what the person needs to do. Now let's talk about where to source for your domestic support. Now, my favorite sources, and I'll share this with you, it's either myself, and when I'm doing it myself, I'll share with you what I do. When I have to do it myself, I go to a radio station, and I've used Adom and Peace in my previous life. I'll tell them what I'm looking for. I would say if the person has to be a particular age, must have finished GSS, should text back. So I'll give them a number that they text back their name, the last school, their name, their age, the last school attended, you know. And I gave, what was very interesting is that when I said name, age, and last school attended, sometimes people text back in the same words, last school attended, you know, instead of the school that they attended. But I would do that I tried newspapers and it didn't yield good results. I didn't get a good pool. But anytime I did a radio announcement, and it was just a very short announcement, I think it cost me it started around 360 something and moved all the way to 700 and something when I was doing it professionally, you know. But I would often start with recruiting by myself. Once I place that ad, it gives me quite a large pool to now begin to recruit from. But there's also referrals, which is another source for me, from family, friends, and colleagues. And then sometimes agencies, irrespective of the source I use, the process I follow is as strict as I'm going to discuss with you now. So those are my favorite sources. Hit the chat box. What's your favorite source? A bit on the self. When you have to do it yourself, it's also possible to find another friend who is seeking to recruit. You place the adverts together. It's an announcement. You go to the radio station and say, use one of the local radio stations. Adom, Peace, and you say it's an announcement. It's not extremely expensive. So if you get 2 or 3 friends coming together, or 3 sisters or brothers coming together, you get such a large pool and you can screen from there. So you share the cost. It makes it easy on us. So I'm hitting the chat box to see your sources. This one says, Doreen, can you share the list, please? I appreciate the bit about clarity. It can resolve a lot of dissatisfaction. Please talk to me about the list, Amazing Grace. What list, please? Is it the list of the tasks they need to do? Mamle says self and referrals. Yes, agencies, referrals and agencies so far. Okay, agencies, all right. Okay, so I see that those are your sources as well. Now, irrespective of the source, I follow a process. Even if I'm getting from an agency, I follow a process, and I'm going to share that with you. Okay, so in sharing that with you, we're moving straight into module 4, which is interviewing for what you need. So let's get it started. I see referrals and agencies. Thank you for sharing. So we all have the same sources so far. So let's talk about, now that you have a pool and you want to interview, what are some of the conversations you can have to bring you closer to finding a good fit for your DS? Now, one of my first thoughts, during the interview, I asked them to tell me a bit about their background. And here's how I do it, because remember I'm interviewing, so I have a sheet before me that has some details. But I asked them to tell me the very last school they attended. And they mentioned, so let's say my last school was XYZ primary school or JHS. I would ask what year. And let's say the person says 2003. So I say, so walk me through what you've done from 2003 to now. So as they speak, I get quite a lot of questions from that, but I always start with the last institution that they have been in, because then it gives a point to start from. And then if the years that the stories there are gaps in the stories they are sharing, I can begin to pick it up and question further. But I often start with them telling me the last place they have been, the last institution, and they walk me through their lives from there. Then I also will often ask them for them to share with me a typical morning for them when they wake up in the morning. Here's what it tells me. Remember, I'm trying to recruit for certain skills and behavior. It helps me know who this person that's moving into my house or coming to work in my home is. So if they say, oh, so when I wake up in the morning, then we wash the dishes from yesterday, which is often what I get. Then I know that for this person, when they move into my home and I'm asking them to wash dishes, the moment they finish eating. It's a new behavior, and it will take them quite a while to adjust. So it prepares my mind to live with them. It helps me accommodate better. It also helps me groom them for a fit in my space, to say, okay, in my space, I typically would say wash every time. But when they're sharing their experiences with me, I don't ask them questions like, I don't begin to tell them from then that in my house, you have to wash it every morning. I'm picking as much as I can about them as possible. But I can ask questions like, how come you didn't wash it the night before? And then one of them once said to me, oh, because once we finish eating in the evening, we pack it up in the bowl, then we go and watch TV in my neighbor's house. So it just helps me understand what their morning is like and what the new shifts that they have to make is, because a lot of the times, remember it is said to the worm in the horseradish, the whole world is horseradish. Like if I'm a worm in a mango, the whole world is my mango. So if I'm coming from a space where I often wash my dishes from last night, the morning before, and I'm moving into a space, a new mango, where they eat, they wash, it just drops, they pick, then it's a whole new skill or new behavior that I have to learn, and it takes a while. From my experience, for me as an individual, when I'm learning a new behavior, anything less than 90 days, I keep slipping into the old behavior. For some, it's actually more. Some people say they have to do that new thing for 120 days or more before it stays, you know? So it just helps me. Then I also ask them to share with me what their typical weekend is like. Here are the responses I typically get. Oh, on Saturday, then we take out all the things in our house. Then we clean the house. Then I ask, okay, so Monday to Friday, what do you do? Oh, Monday to Friday, we don't do any cleaning. So it helps me understand that this person is now moving into a space where you're telling them, especially if there's a baby, mop the floor all the time. And they're looking at you wondering, I remember one of my domestic support, when I said, it's time to mop the floor, she looked at the floor, then she looks at my face. I could immediately tell what she was thinking. And I said, it's not clean, it's not dirty, huh? She says, then she nods and she smiles, she says, no. You know, and I said, yes, but there's a baby in the house. And if there's dirt on the floor, we cannot tell. So let's mop anyway, you know. So in her mind, why are you mopping? Where she's coming from, we do this once a week and we're fine. Suddenly I'm cleaning a place where I don't see anything dirty. And I remember that lady having a conversation with one of her friends on the phone. And she says, hey, this new house I've come to, even when there's nothing on the floor, we are cleaning and sweeping. So you see that it's a whole new behavior for them as well. Then I also say, I ask them to tell me some of the things they are most thankful for. It helps me appreciate their psyche. I ask them to tell me someone they are struggling to forgive. You know, sometimes I just say, some of them actually break down and cry as they share stories with me, but it helps me understand what are those things that are a no-no for them. Most importantly, I find out their why. I have found in Ghana that you rarely have people who are doing domestic work as their lifelong dream or their lifelong career. About 90% of the people I've interviewed on my journey doing this professionally, and that's quite a lot. I mean, sometimes I got a pool of about 700 people, you know. For about 90% of these people, they're doing this as a means to an end. So I'll ask them, what is it that they really want to do? Why are you doing this? And some of them tell me, oh, I want the money so I can start a trade. What kind of trade? Now we go here, I actually take time to go deep and document for them. So he says, I want to learn to sew. I ask, how much will it cost? Here's the interesting thing. About 60 to 80% of the people who want to learn a particular thing don't know how much it will cost, you know? So I would say, okay, go and find out how much it will cost, because then it will influence how you save and how long you need to save. So we break it down. I find out their why. From gathering data from quite a number of the people I recruited, I found that the people who want to start a trade are those who leave really early, like 3 months or 4 months into the relationship, especially if what she's thinking of is starting a trade on a table in front of her house. If she gets anything around, anything really small that she, in her mind can start the business, she leaves or he leaves to start the business. And rightfully so. Remember, the domestic relationship is not an easy relationship. You have two bosses, and their kids as bosses or employers, but you are supervising. It's an unusual employment relationship. So I always get granular on their why. I want to find out why they're doing this. If they say, oh, I have a child in school, somebody who has a child in school has a lot of social responsibilities because they will have a number of funerals, a number of outdoorings, and if they can't do that, because they are not meeting a social goal, they will not feel fulfilled and they will leave. So I find out their why, and it's a very critical part of the recruitment process. I'm hitting the chat box to see what's come so far. This one says, I see Emilia Kitchen. May I ask if you lived in Folly? Sorry, Doreen, for using your chat box. Okay, don't worry. Emilia has responded. I'm sure you've seen it. Amazing Grace says, Doreen, what are your thoughts on keeping a distinction between domestic support and family member? Now, I will talk about that. And that's a very beautiful question, Amazing Grace. I love family. I wouldn't lie to you. There's a bit about when there's family, when it's family and you're like a little child in the house, where there's a lot more ownership. This is like one of my own, like a cousin and all of that. I also find out though that if the terms are not spelled out nicely, it stands the chance of bringing a lot of confusion or quarrels in the family. So let's say a cousin or a sister brings their child to you and says, you help her, take her as your own child. For me, that's not enough. I really want to understand what it is, what their expectations are for the person. But if the person says, and I will ask, see, assumptions are the termites of relationships. When we make all of these assumptions, like they say, take her as your child. And then suddenly the person moves in, maybe your children, when they are young, so they go to school with lunch box, and there are particular packed drinks, small drinks in there. And this person probably stays at home, and you say that they probably cannot have the packed drink, that small packed drink when they are home. They suddenly feel that you're not treating them like your child, you know? So even when it's a family relationship, I want to find out what is it that they're looking for. So, oh, she's finished or he's finished SS. He will write the exams again. I can't afford to pay for it. Let them help work with you, or let them help you, as they would always say, and help them write their SS and get to the university. When we're having that conversation, I would say when we are getting to the university, how will we support the child? I want us to establish that it will be the two of us. You know, that kind of thing. So that we are not starting something that it's it may be difficult to have to bring to a conclusion. But I really love family. I do know though that it gets murky. It's good to help family, but have the right conversations from the beginning if it's family. Okay. Now let's talk about pre-employment protocols, and we're moving. You know, this is good. We are making inroads. So, what are some of the pre-employment protocols? So you've interviewed this person, you found a fit, and now you know that this is somebody that you can work with. What are some of the pre-employment protocols? For me, I get a personal detail form. Remember that I love process. I love detail. So I list, just like an employment form, I take their details, their parents' names, where they are. I go into last school attended, but I also take evidence of the last school attended. Now, if I screen you and I say I want to work with you and you cannot provide these things, I don't move on with a relationship. I want a form of ID, and the evidence of school can be a form of ID when they don't have any ID. But I insist on guarantors. And I insist on one guarantor being either a family member, like a mom, father, an uncle, but I also want one who is in employment. So I say, no, definitely from your mother's side or your father's side, or your uncle, we can find somebody who is in formal employment that I can contact. Then I get a passport size picture because they will go for the police background check, and I get a full picture. And this, I keep that as the dossier that I build on the person. In the event that something happens and we need to find the person, I would want to know that I did my checks correctly. For everybody who stays with me, I do a police background check. Extremely important. Then I also have them go through employment screening, where I go speak to a doctor and I say, I'm bringing this person into my home. The person will take care of a child. Please go through, or the person will be responsible for meal prep. Please go through the right test for me, and they do that. The background check and the health screening is at my cost. Sometimes even the passport size picture, sometimes they don't have a passport size picture. That also is at my cost. But I take all of those details and build a document profile or a profile on this person. Now, when it comes to making the offer, after the person has gone through the health screening and gone through the background check and all of that, I do a very simple offer letter, but it contains all the details. I have found that, remember I said that nobody wants to do this for the rest of their life. So I say the duration of the contract. I often will only give a 1-year contract. And I will say we'll renew it if both of us are okay with this relationship. So I often start with 1 year. And people ask me, but how about, how will your children feel if you're changing people in the house? My response is, and has always been, my children change teachers every year. And they are comfortable. They move from KG1 to KG2, it's a new teacher. KG2 to class 1, new teacher, it's always a new teacher, and they are comfortable. So I want that, this person, I want it to be an employment, you know? So I state the duration of the contract. I find that anything more than 2 years, especially for somebody in their mid or early teens who are looking to do something with their life, staying at home and working as a domestic support becomes not satisfying anymore, you know? So I don't want to set our expectations up for failure. And remember, when they tell me their why, it helps me break it down to, okay, this is how long you need to work to get X, Y, Z, or the amount you need to get started. Then we talk about salary, but when I'm stating the salary, remember that if you're given an offer, then you need to have at the back of your mind minimum wage. How I've learned to do that is to quantify meals. So I would say maybe your breakfast, lunch, and dinner is 10 cedis. I'm just stating something that gives the person an appreciation of their total offer. Because sometimes you start the relationship and they say 2 months and they say, my friend went to become a security, and the person earns 500 or 450. And I say, yes, but you also earn 800. You get cash of 200 or 300 or 400, depending on where you're recruiting from. And you get meals of XYZ, accommodation of this, that your friend in security has to pay accommodation, you know. So I have those conversations with them. Then there's health. You need to talk about what happens when they're sick. For me, immediately, thanks to National Health Insurance, we get that. But for those bits that National Health Insurance does not cover, remember that because this person is in your home and taking care of your meals and your children, their health becomes something that you need to begin to plan for. So recently, somebody said to me that she signed her, she has a family health insurance, and at a point she had to put her domestic support on it as well. Some of my clients used to do uniform for their domestic support. It's an entirely optional choice, but talk about it so that there are no gray areas. Talk about it. They have to wear their own clothes, which is what I do in my home. You wear your own clothes. But for those who, especially for the foreign people, the foreigners we have in Ghana, those who recruit, their organizations recruit the people for them, they like to have the people in uniforms. On the offer letter, I talk about what it says that you'll be responsible for doing. Remember the list we spoke about earlier? We get into details there. I talk about your time off, if it's a live-out arrangement, reporting time, and then I put a termination clause. Typically for a domestic relationship, the termination clause, there's no notice. And it's no notice from either side. Because if you say, you have to give me notice, but I will not give you notice, it doesn't work. And because it's in your home, typically when the person comes to say, I'm thinking of leaving, it's almost, they've left already. Okay. Now let's talk about starting the relationship right, which is critical. Remember that it's an employment relationship. So please, let's have that at the back of our mind. And start defining our culture from the start is very important. At the beginning, we need to talk about how the person addresses me. I find that when the person begins to call you ma, or calls you their mother, then the motherly expectations are there. I often, from the onset, I like to, I mean, I didn't do that with my first two, but for my third, I often would say to them, I don't intend to be your mother. It's not a motherly relationship. This is employment. You're working for your dream. And I need for us to remember that. So whatever works for you, there's people call them aunties, some call them madam, some insist on Mrs. this. Please, but address it so that from the onset, the person has that at the back of their minds. Have your schedule ready for onboarding. And your schedule should include what the person is doing at particular times in your house. I'll give you an example of a sample schedule shortly. Have your check-in checklist ready. So when the person comes in, what are the things that you want to check for? Sometimes they walk in, if they are coming into a living arrangement, they don't have basic things. So have a checklist that helps you check for those things that they will require that they don't have. So that the next day now, they go to bath and they are wondering what towel, what sponge. Have a checklist for the things that you will check when they first move in. Also have your as-is list. Your as-is list is what you do before they come in. So I have my as-is grocery list. Maybe I use 6 things of milk. With a new person, I probably need to 6 things of milk a month. With a new person, I probably have to make it 8. So I share that with them. I say, because you're joining, typically my as-is milk is 6. With you now, we will get 8. So the person knows that what they see in the store is for the month, and this is their inclusion. But remember, I'm really process oriented. So even for when I have grilled fish or grilled chicken, and I seal it in the Ziploc bag and I keep it, I say, oh, okay, typically would have maybe 12 for the week, but because you've joined, we'll make it 15. I get granular like that. I find it helps the relationship. So there are no gray areas of, okay, is she gone? Can I go and pick this? I help them live with me, by telling them what is and what we are adding because they've come. I have a list of emergency contacts. When my kids were younger, it was on the fridge. It's no more on the fridge. It's on their phones now, but it was on the fridge with the magnetic hold on there. And I'll tell them what constitutes displeasure for me. My son used to laugh at me. He says, Mommy, have you ever thought of the fact that it's only me that when I have to bring friends home, I have to give them an instruction manual. Don't touch her walls. Don't drop water on the floor. So I tell them the things that make me unhappy, but I also tell them what they can do to earn a tip, a point, or a bonus. Just like work. So my son tells me that for my very last domestic support, says, Mommy, when you hunk, the reason why she takes such a while to come and open the door is like she goes to check the beds to be sure that they are really nicely laid. Because I told her that one way she can earn a small tip at the end of the month in addition to her salary is if I walk in and the beds are all laid. And when I walk into a room that the bed is laid, I just go, So I told her that if you do that. So apparently when she times when I'm coming, and when she sees me, she quickly goes to check the beds before she comes to open the door for me. But I just help them make the relationship, just help them live with me. And then I talk about how we resolve conflict. If I'm not happy about something, this is how we will address it. How would you want me to address it when you're unhappy about something? It's important because I don't want it to be that when the issue has happened, if it's your child and you are like my fancy father who repeats himself 6 times on one issue, if the person is your employee, they probably would not appreciate that. For you to go on and on and on and on, it's like me missing a point or a process at work, and then my supervisor comes, and every day you're doing this, yesterday you do that, and then it becomes, so the relationship becomes one that, yeah, I'm getting the money, but yeah, I would like to leave, So we talk about how we resolve conflict, and I find that it really, really helps. Remember, the mind shift is, this is what kind of employer do I want to be? I talked about a sample schedule. Now, typically, this is what a schedule looks like. So you list the days of the week there, and then you list on your first column your timelines. So if you are living in Accra and you want to rush out for traffic and wake up time is 5:30, you have the schedule ready so that you can discuss it with them. And for me, one of my displeasure points, I used to say to my domestic support that if you wake up late 3 or 4 times, you are ready to go. This will be very hard for you to handle, you know. And I ask them when they're waking up, and I'll say, okay, for the first few days or weeks, I'll support you by waking you up, you know, that kind of thing. But after a while, you have to be able to pick this up by yourself. And we go through this. I will list at 8 o'clock. So if there's a child and they're feeding your child, and you know that already your child needs, you know, some children, you have to play with them before they eat. And that process takes 1.5 hours. You don't load the schedule such that the domestic support will now rush feeding your child or leave your child unattended to take care of other things. So doing this and getting really granular will help you appreciate what can easily be handled in a day. And then you move those things that cannot be handled. You do this in order of priority and move those things that cannot be handled in the day out so that the person can do what is possible within a day. So if they have to make a meal for your mom, but they also have to do the laundry on a particular day, and the laundry is heaped and it's hand washing, and feeding your mom, maybe your mom wants to be having a conversation as they're feeding. So that process is 2 hours. Then there's laundry. And you say the person should do the laundry in the morning, or you complain when you come home and the laundry is not dry. It's an unrealistic schedule. So you doing this and using it during the onboarding just helps. In the afternoon, when I had my kids were much younger, in the afternoon, I insisted on rest. Because we used to wake up really, really early. I would say to her, go to bed, take a short rest around this time. And I often would tell her, I would say, call me on the landline. Back then we had a landline at home. I would say, call me on the landline at 1:30, because the 1:30 was when the driver came home to pick her to go and pick the kids from school. But I often wanted her to rest before the kids come home, because we woke up really early, and I found that even me at work around 12:30, I was tired. The only reason I couldn't sleep was because you can't put your head on the table at work and sleep. But for somebody at home, getting her to have that rest and being very active for when your kids come back was important to me. And then I insisted that at a particular time, they also retire into their room. I mean, when they go there and they want to chat with their friends or call their family, I'm fine. But the work had to end at a particular time, so that although it's in my space, it also felt like work for them, and that they knew that I cared about them. So please feel free to customize this in any way that you want, but this is what a schedule looks like. If you remember those specific details, feeding your baby takes 2 hours. I had a client, feeding her child, you needed to sing, you needed to fetch water, put the toys in. It was 2 hours, you know, and the baby fed 4 times in a day. So asking when the domestic support feeds the baby and clean the baby's items, there was no space for anything else. But then suddenly when we did the schedule, she realized, oh, then how will I do my washing? It meant they probably needed to wash in the evening or move it to weekend, but it was a real conversation to have, and it's important that we do that. On maintaining the relationship, I often had monthly sessions with them, and when I was recruiting for other people, I would call them and say, have that conversation with them. Whereas we would talk about things not working as they were happening, I needed them to have a session where they felt like the focus was on them. It was like 10 minutes. I would ask them what's working for them so far. Then I'll say what's working for me, what could be better. You know those things we do at work. There's a very short conversation. Sometimes as we drove to the market, we'd have that. But I positioned it from the beginning that every month we'll talk about how you're feeling and what all of us want to do different, you know. Remember that their background is extremely different from yours. You know, they're coming to a space from their comfort zone to a space that is entirely new, and they have to unlearn, relearn, and it's a tough journey. So please let's remember that, all right? Because once you consider the background, it will help you understand that as human beings, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. Remember that. So when the person is not, the first week, the person can't wake up the way you can. Remember, it's new learning for them, and they're coming from a different background. Finally, let's talk about when we need to say goodbye. I have found that for the home domestic work, probably having a contract that says, I'll give you notice is unrealistic. So there's no notice. So I say to her or to him, when it's time for you to go, or you ever feel that you want to end it before 1 year, let me know. But I often structured my contract with them such that if you stayed your full contract, you earned maybe 20% extra. I'm just saying. So let's say I'm paying you, just for analogy, let's say I'm paying you 100 cedis. If you stayed for 1 year, it means you had 1,200. Or you're earning 200, 100 comes to you as cash, 100 goes into your savings. It's 1,200, it's yours. If you wait to the end of your contract, in addition to the 1,200, I will add 300, I'm just saying. But I give them a reason why they have to go to the end of the contract. And then at the end of the 1 year, we decide on a new contract. That's how I do it. So even if the person wants to learn to sew and we've broken down what they will need to sew, they know that when they take their statement at the end of a year or 2 years, this is what they will see on it. It just helps make the relationship easier. Now, at the point when they want to leave and you say, oh, you broke this and you did this, I'm taking it from your savings. Here's my take on that. Please talk about it from the onset if you're going to be doing anything like that with them. Because at the point that they're leaving and then you suddenly want to take things out, it becomes very, it causes dissonance. It's unhealthy, you know, and so it's important that you talk about it in the beginning. If they are going to be breaking things and you're going to take it from their income, please let them know, all right? And all the other things that we haven't mentioned, but for you from your experience, you can add onto this list. You're welcome. Please be my guest. Now, if I were doing this all over again, what's the one tip that I will add? See, self-awareness is the most critical. I'm able to say I love process and I look out for somebody who is process-oriented because I know that about myself. And for me, if I'm bringing somebody, it's not just that the person has a good smile and they speak. I would want to ask questions that help me identify what energy they flow with. Are they more conversation than process, more process than conversation? I would want to have that because I find that when you have to figure out your way in the dark, it takes quite a while for this relationship to get started. It's just like work. If I know, then I'm not driving blindly, you know. I also know that the very process-oriented people also don't have a fear of criticism. So if you bring in somebody who is process-oriented and suddenly for everything they do, you're criticizing, for them it's a lot more, give me time, prepare me ahead of time, let's have that conversation, you know. So knowing who the person is just helps that conversation. I would want to end by saying, in all of this, self-awareness is critical. Because remember, you need personal mastery, which is the foundation of your emotional intelligence, to make any relationship work. You know what the psychologists say? They say that 27 to 45% of your success in any relationship is based on your EQ. Your IQ only contributes 6% of success at work, at home. So let's work on our self-awareness and help those in our space know us and appreciate us better. So let's hit the chat box now for a quick conversation. I've exhausted my time, but I'm ending this share and hitting the chat box so that we can have a quick 5 minutes conversation. I'll just indulge you quickly for that and we're off. It's 10:30 and we promised 1.5 hours for this session. So this one says, what are your thoughts on okay, I've spoken about that, amazing grace. This one is Amelia. Amelia says, how you treat your DS will affect the efforts and results they put out. This has been my experience. Respect in any employment relationship is key. Absolutely, Amelia. Amazing Grace says, thank you, Doreen. This has been very useful. Amazing Grace, I'm so thankful to you for your presence in all the sessions. I really appreciate you. Kafui says, thank you so much. This has been very educative. Kafui, you know you have 7/7, right? Ladies and gentlemen, Kafui has been in all the sessions. Kafui, I am delighted, humbled, and grateful at the same time. Thank you. Micah says, OMG Doreen, this has been so enlightening, useful, and transformational. Micah, thank you. I'm glad it was useful. Sheila says, thank you so much, Doreen, for this insight. I have learned a lot. Sheila, Sheila, my colleague, right? Sheila, you're most welcome. I hope this helps you make the relationship better. Gloria says, very detailed and useful. Gloria, thank you for being on the sessions. Nakwe, thank you, Doreen. I have learned a lot. Now you're welcome. Emilia, yes, thank you, Doreen. God bless you. Emilia, I'm most grateful. Thank you. Priscilla says, very helpful, Doreen. Thank you. Priscilla, you're welcome. Sheila, to me, yes. I thought so. Sheila, you're welcome. Rashida, good man. Rashida, thank you so much for joining. My girlfriend and rival, Mama D, I enjoyed this session. It was insightful. Thank you, Rashida. I'm most grateful. I see only one question in the Q&A. I'm just going to take it. This one says, unspoken behavior, sexually active help. How do you handle this? It's a very useful question, Deborah. I remember that it was one of my clients who drew my attention to it. So she was recruiting a 20-year-old girl from me. And she asked the girl, do you have a boyfriend? And the girl said, no. And the client said, and the client is an elder, I call her mom up to today. She's one of my best friend's mother. And the client said, you are 20 and you don't have a boyfriend. I met my husband when I was 20. So you've never had a boyfriend or you don't have one now. I need to know so that I know how I will make time for you to see this boy. Then the girl suddenly opens up and she says, actually, I have a boyfriend. And then she mentioned that he was in the Polytechnic then. I said, yes, it's unusual that you are 20, you're beautiful. And the girl was very beautiful and you don't have a boyfriend. So what's the arrangement we're going to make? Do you know that that client arranged for the boy to come home? When the boy finished his Polytechnic, he got a job in one of these West African countries. When they had to get married, they married the girl in my client's home. And it's one of the most beautiful experiences I had when I was running an agency. But the woman was so real. She said, if we women will quit being hypocritical about, because the girl hasn't figured her life out, she doesn't have hormones. Like really, she does have hormones. And that's why I talked about time off. So if you need to give the person time off, it's critical. They will not suddenly become not sexually active because they live in your home. So time off so they can deal with their own personal issues as well. How do you deal with religion in such relationships? Gloria, we spoke about religion earlier on. We mentioned that some clients, it's a very touchy area, but some clients will say that for similarities and for understanding, they want to recruit people of the same faith as they do. So I had a lot of my Muslim clients insisting on Muslim girls or boys, and I understood. And I had a number of Christians saying they preferred Christians. And even sometimes we were so lucky that we would get Adventists getting Adventists. And it made it really, really easy to navigate the relationship. Remember, Meg J, the psychologist, she says, yes, opposites attract, but you need similarities to keep the relationship going. Without similarities, the relationship suffers. That's on relationships, on religion, sorry. Beck says, thanks for this. I learned a lot. There were many things we overlooked, but not anymore. Absolutely. Very important, Bex. Assumptions are the termites of relationships. Ophelia says, I've never had to deal with DS in my life yet, but I'm so happy I joined. I have learned so much. Thank you, Doreen. Ophelia, you're very welcome. And remember, I'm going to put this as a program online so that when you need it, you can refer to it as well. Ajwa says, thanks, Doreen. It's timely for me. Ajwa, I'm really grateful for you joining, and I'm happy that this has been useful for you. The last question in the Q&A before we end, this one says, how do you deal with, religious differences and superstition? Superstition is like our beliefs, right? I once had, I said I've recruited 10 and 7 have lived with me, either between, typically my house helps stay for 2 years, typically. After that, I kind of feel that maybe I also like very determined, focused ladies. So there are things they want to do with their lives. So for 2 years, and I had one of them come, one of the 3 who didn't stay for long. She said to me, Madam, I used to live on a story building. But she came to me one morning, she was bored. you know, and the kids had just started nursery school. And she said, I want a place I can weed or plant things. And I lived on a story building. And I said to her, okay, apart from my flower pot, and it was only aloe vera, apart from a flower pot, I'm not sure how we can make this work for you. And she says, it's not nice to be on your own. You know, like she gets bored. And I understood her. So she and I were in that relationship for 4 or 5 months. At a point I asked her, would you want to go back? And she said yes. And I just let her be, because my place was not it for her. It's there are things she wanted that I could not give her at that time. I've had very interesting ones as well. I remember one of my ladies asking me, but madam, if we eat all of this around this time, what will we eat at Christmas? And I said, at Christmas, we'll eat the same thing. Okay. So yeah, their background and where they're coming from. So I typically recruit. Remember I said I recruit, I place an advert, I collaborate with a few friends, and we just place that, we split the cost. It's never been more than 600 and something. We split the cost and we get the people and we screen using the process that I've gone through. All right. Thank you so much. This is the first time we're doing 8 minutes above our time, and I'm delighted that you've spent your morning with me. I don't take it for granted. Thank you so much for joining YWL 2020. I look forward to seeing you on Monday's session. Monday, we have the phenomenal Taka. Taka is my coach. Now, let me tell you about Taka. The energy with which she comes. And Taka has a way of making you want more for yourself, from like when you have a conversation with her. She's just one of a kind. So if you haven't registered, registration for Taka's session closes today at 5. Please register. She'll be walking us through transitioning properly. When you find out that you're in a relationship that is no more working, like work or personal relationship, but you want to transition in a way that doesn't cause your next you to suffer the destiny at the end. You know, she'll use her personal experiences to walk us through that. So I'm really excited for Monday, which will be our 8th session out of 12. We are gradually grinding to a halt, and I'm delighted that you've all joined. So thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. I'd like to acknowledge the people I see. Abeku, Nanajua, Ekwa, my girlfriend. We have unfinished business. Begs, Christiana Safway. Ooh, Christiana, thank you. Deborah, Ekoba, Charlie, my husband, you are too much. Thank you. When I come home, today we should go out, all right? We should really go out. You've been amazing. Emilia, Galaxy, oh, I'm sorry, Galaxy, I don't know you, but I'm sure, I just want to say thank you. Gloria Bimpon, the love is deep, but you know. Ismail, Mamle, process people, saying hello out there. All right, Makita, Micah, Na, Kwei, Nane Jerry, thank you. And thank you for referring your friend as well. I'm really grateful. Nana Kweku, Ophelia, Mensima, there's a P as well. Priscilla, Rashida, Rita Kafui, Sally K, and Sheila Ejepon. I'm grateful to you all. Have a good day and enjoy your weekend. See you on Monday. Bye for now.